from the team at Streamline Publishing, publishers of Fine Art Connoisseur, Plein Air Magazine, and weekly newsletters Fine Art Today, Realism Today, Plein Air Today, and American Watercolor, and events, the Plein Air Convention and the Figurative Art Convention. We offer over 400 different art instruction tutorials and ultra high-quality video by the world's leading artists. If you like what you see, help us support our artists and our team with your purchase. Each video aired has a special discount code for today only in the comments section with a link to the video offered. And to see everything we do, or if you want to receive notice of new releases, new products, and new events for artists, simply click the other link, which says, "See everything we do." Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Rhodes with Fine Art Connoisseur and Plein Air Magazine. I have studied Russian art. I've been to Russia many times, and I've learned that the Russians really have mastered the art of drawing. They have techniques that they do differently than everybody else. Drawing and painting, it's very important in the art world. I decided to get someone to teach you those techniques, and that's Alexey Steele, who came out of the great Russian schools and has developed a great process himself. I hope you enjoy this video.
Друзья, добро пожаловать в мастерскую. Friends, welcome to my studio, to my world. Our studios, it's where the greatest part of what makes our life so unique and incredible happens. So this is my studio and my life, where we have such a great time with my friends, where we work, where we play, where we party, where so many great things emerge and happen, including on paper and on canvases. So art is incredibly personal and deeply engaging affair. And what we have today is essentially that act of friendship in art. And as today, we're going to paint Chelsea. And Chelsea is not just simply a model, and when you work with the model, I think it's really important to think a model that poses for, it's not necessarily like you look at the chair or you look at the chandelier. It's a person who, with this incredibly extraordinary personal world, that point of the universe through which you relate to the whole mystery of being and finding yourself there. So that great process of discovery, that's what drives this remarkable, fun process, which is art, because that is also so important to remember. Art is fun. Art is incredible joy. It's an act of pure joy. That's why hooks us to it. Those were fortunate people. We're a fortunate bunch. And our group goes back, I think we're one of the oldest secret societies in the world. We'll go back 100,000 years. Artists tap into the very source of life. And that in the very source of that life is this great joy of co-creating. We see the mysteries of the universe and we touch them, and they flow through the brush. So when great masters like, for example, Richard Schmidt, when they say that art is this great act and this great fun, that's what it really, I think, means. That's what takes us through this incredibly laborious process of learning, of going through basics. And again, there is never just basics. Basics, it's not something that you learn now and then forget and move to bigger, brighter things. Basics are principles that stay with you forever. They stay with you in every brush stroke, in everything that you do. But you develop and you build on them. And you build sometimes to pretty advanced things, because there is no ending to nature's greatness. And you always, regardless, the farther you go, the more vistas you see, the more you see how great and remarkable that world that we portray is. So every new point that you advance to is your new ground zero from which you see where to go farther. And it's always a phenomenal discovery. That discovery, that incredible joy of that discovery is what makes us better. Today, I think working with Chelsea, with my great friend Chelsea, who poses for me a lot, as well as for my good friends, as well as we're partying and we're hanging out together. So it is personal. So, and I did quite a few pieces before. So what I'm sort of get an idea of, get excited of doing and working with today is in a way a result of the whole number of previous studies, works that we did with Chelsea. And I think sort of bringing closer in that sensation of looking into that great being inside, which is a sensation of portraiture to such a great degree. It's not just a face, it's not object, it's a subject. It's this internal life and unique presence which is there. And that's what I'm attracted the most in the great works of art. When you walk through the museums and you're suddenly stopped by that presence. You go through galleries, there's these great pieces, and you see this great piece, and suddenly something stops you because suddenly you're in the presence of being, beyond being a painting. And when we look at Velázquez, when we look at Rembrandt, I think we're witnessing that we're suddenly in the presence, not only a great painting, but we're in the presence of that being that achieved immortality. Through that act of joy, which is art. And that is what keeps us doing what we do, keep enjoying what we do. And I think that's what we, every day, I feel so grateful that I can just be in my studio and pick up my brush and paint. And every day you stand on everything you knew before, and you forget everything you knew before, all at the same time, because whatever you're about to discover is so great, it's so incredible. Every painting is the new life. Every painting is a new discovery. Every painting is this joy. So here we are. Поехали. Think we shall start. Let's get to the fun part, to this sort of base of what we do, which is our paints, which is so great and physically beautiful to look at and to touch, because most of the painting actually happens on the palette, and palette itself is a painting. One thing that goes first is a Kremser white, which is a sort of Old Holland's wonderful flake kind of white, really beautiful and heavy. And then I go to titanium Williamsburg. And for the heck of it, I would also try, because I'm just sitting sort of on my Sennelier thing, just to try the different shifts in viscosity, and then just Sennelier titanium that I just got. Basically, I'm on a test stage with that, so I'm not going to be probably painting, or maybe I'll just throw. So we have cadmium yellow deep. And cadmium lemon, just for the, to have it. I'll get my orange, cad orange. Great, and in Williamsburg, that pigmentation is just so, you feel the pigment, feel the rock in your hands, you feel the earth in your hands. So, and then I love the, in the earths, I love the Italian grouping of raw sienna and raw umber and ochre, but in an Italian version, which is just slightly cooler. So let's start with Italian yellow ochre. And Italian raw sienna. Same thing, And as you see, as they get warm and yellow, and they almost turn greener to that side of the palette. And as this side of the palette is going to progress on the cool side out of reds and wrapping into the green, it's sort of the greens will sort of that green theme connects over here back to that and then go up warm. So that's where we at here. Williamsburg King's Blue. And Provence Violet Reddish. And if you see, they together essentially do the same thing as this does, but sort of with more control on that exact, red blue within that purplish range that they give us. Cadmium red dip. And alizarin. All Williamsburgs. And then there is this really cool paint that I like really much. It's the Spanish earth in Williamsburg. It's really this great sort of this, that almost serves the function of burnt sienna. I would always have my burnt sienna on that spot. But just finding that Spanish earth, I really love that. It just has this cool reddish tint to that. Beautiful. So now we'll go to burnt umber. And also Italian raw umber. Just like Italian yellow ochre and Italian Rossiana, that's Italian family sort of. They are just slightly on the greener side. And then ivory black. So I go to ultramarine blue. And a cobalt blue. I kind of like also use indigo once in a while. So maybe I might just put between ivory black and I might put indigo because indigo is almost that gives you the same thing as the blues do. And then we go with phthalo turquoise. Viridian of phthalo turquoise. I love this phthalo on Williamsburg. Just beautiful green, just beautiful. Sometimes, and actually that little thing like cobalt turquoise sometimes is good too, just to have it. Okay, so that's we have my lush, this great things. It's just sometimes I even put paints that I'm not gonna use just because I love paints. It is a science, but at the same time, it's visceral. It's sometimes you mix paint. You get from one, you love this paint in one thing and you love in another. I'm so tempted. I get my hands now suddenly on Senneliers. I'm almost tempted to try Senneliers right now, just from scratch. Without never painting with them before, which probably not that good of an idea. But I can't wait to try them as well. So it's great. It's a constant process. Your knowledge is important. Knowledge you gain. With every step you gain knowledge. But you don't hang on to that as something you learn and then accept that whatever we don't know is much greater than whatever we know. All the greatest artists and the greatest practitioners in every field eventually see that and understand that. Okay, so now what do I have? I have my Gamsol. Love Gamsol. Mineral spirits, by the way, all Russian school use mineral spirits, and we call them kerosene. And it was so funny. I have so funny my dad's kerosene stories. As we grew up, and there would be some things that would be made by the Soviet industry, Soviet art supply industry. But They would have pinene, they would have the turpentines, but my dad would love mineral spirits. They did not produce mineral spirits. So he would go sometimes find this 20-gallon jars of pure kerosene. And once when he was painting and giving a lecture at their jet fighter base, and he was talking with them that what he was painting on, and they start laughing and say, "Man, you're painting on jet fuel." I said, "Oh, great, yeah, absolutely." So they gave him like a whole jars of jet fuel. So mineral spirits are fabulous, and Gamsol is excellent mineral spirit. Love it. So, and for my binder, there is also different things. It's a walnut oil. It's fantastic to use, and safflower oil. I definitely want to use more and try this. But recently, thanks to, again, as we talk about camaraderie, if we talk about friends and sharing, I'm so grateful to Daniel Graves because linseed oil, which I always loved, but it's so difficult to clean. And Daniel shared his great recipe of cleaning that, which we did with for almost 2 months. And and the way it's now it's so clean, pure clean linseed is fabulous. Great, beautiful medium to paint with. So. Oh God, it's a long, laborious thing. You just silica, you just essentially sand, put the sand in sand and water mixture, half and half, sand and water, and you shake it like viciously, and a little bit of salt for kind of few times a day, and then you throw it in the freezer, and that was and then if you throw it in the freezer, and it's as the water freezes, you would not believe the amount of crap which sits in there. On the first run, I have a photograph. So it's sensational. So all the sun bleaching, which actually we did for years, it gives an appearance of a cleaner oil, but all the stuff is actually sits still there. So this is the way you physically take it out, and you run this process then 10, 20 times. There is no. You basically run it until the point you say, you know what, now I want to use it. So another thing, sometimes I like adding just a little drop of clove, very, very, very tiny little drop of clove to my don't overdo it because that extends painting time. It extends it a little bit. It's as extender. It's wonderful. So here we are. So now we'll look, and as we look at Chelsea, and as we look at this setup and the way it's set, it's this mixture of cools and warms, in the middle of which the form emerges, in this intentionally set middle tonality, when there is no hard shadows, when there is no hard light, when that all beauty of color comes out of this mid-tonal range. And if you look at my brushes, most of them are beautiful rosemary brushes. These great rosemary brushes. There is nothing like it around. Love them. Once you get to try them, you get addicted to them, just to their feel, to their weight, and particularly to their bristles. My favorite, her long ivories flats, and some filberts, and her mongooses. It's just spectacular. It's the best thing that exists right now. So most of them are that. Just some other brushes just that I use just for breaking, just getting it in. And another thing that I do since my school years, wrapping them in after washing. I'm wrapping them in toilet paper or tissue, because to keep the shade, because when the brushes, when they get out like that, in that as a in the matter of the bush. It's great for some, by the way, for some painting approaches, but for the way I work right now and I like to keep that edge of the brush firm. So, great friend Rosemary. As we do, friends, as we always, it's all collective affair. Art is a great community. We're community that stretches back again. You know, people who were before us, we're part of their community as well. That's what tradition is all about. And we're only able to advance and try and play with and have this tremendous amount of fun with our today's images, our today people that we're fascinated by, our today's materials, and all of that we're capable of doing because we have this remarkable, fantastic, and noble tradition that stretches behind us for millennia. So every time we paint, we honor those who were behind us and those who will come after us. Oops, see? I might start moving the palette, which is not a good idea. Got it? There are so many ways to paint. There is no one right way of painting. That's why traditional art, that realism, true realism, that is informed by real world and comes out of your personal human capabilities as opposite to technological capabilities, is infinite. It's absolutely infinite, because once you understand the principles behind that visual image, it gives you complete, almost unimaginable freedom in interpreting it. And that's really important to understand. Whenever people say, oh yeah, realism is just a sterile. No. Realism is the key. The principles, the visual principles behind that are formulated in realism is the key to this ultimate freedom where there's so infinite amount of choices. And almost every time that you paint, you make these choices, you make these calls. So you can start with monochromatic wash. You can start with a tint wash, something that will give you that coloristic sort of set to begin with. So I love this sort of, you can play one off another. It's just infinite. And another amazing thing, every time I touch the towel, I say, viva maestra. That great, the viva towels that Richard Schmidt shared, this just as so many incredible things that he shared with so many of us. And we've been so fortunate. I mean, genius, it's a genius of art theory and practice. So every time I grab that viva towel, I always say in my brain, viva maestra. Yeah. We're so fortunate to have this great generation that saved art tradition for us in the darkest of hours of the 20th century, and particularly in America, in Russia, generation of my dad, generation of Richard Schmidt, Bert Silverman, these great American artists that really, in a deep way, suffered for our art form and preserved that art form alive for us and for our generation. So, and in Russia, so that is, we always gotta, be grateful and pay respect for this incredible thing that they did for us. And this incredible knowledge that they formulated. And they took that great knowledge to the new stage. And now we hopefully, our generation will be able to contribute something great and interesting and exciting to this great collective knowledge of ours. Now I go to this really fun thing, and again, product of friendship. See, these brushes, Rosemary, wonderful darling and a great friend, Rosemary, made specially for me, kind of to my specs. I was always puzzled looking at brushes at late Rapin and Saroyas, this long brushes, and I was saying, oh my God, so this is probably, some kind of, just thing that has no really practical application. It's something kind of, joke or whatever. And I love the Escoda. Before Rosemary's, I used Escodas a lot, and Escoda makes them long brushes. And I could never, and you hear this, oh my God, you can handle that. It's a completely disbalanced. It has this huge rock over here. And once my good friend Heather from Jerry's brought me some brushes. They were not that good of brushes, but the handle was absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect handle. So I immediately, Rosemary, can you put on the handle of that kind, put your brushes? So she did. She did this line of this long handle brushes sort of to my request, and we had great time going back and forth collaborating on that, and I just love that. Just love those big brushes. And as a matter of fact, on Air Exported, that's when I tried them first, and there was a particularly difficult passage on the foreshortening of his legs and bodies that I managed to do only because of these brushes. Because what essentially this brush really does, it gives you permanent step back, permanent squint, or permanent step back. So particularly when you start doing and laying out the form, that is incredibly helpful, fabulous, fabulous, fabulous tool. So at that point you said, aha, that's why really Rembrandt and Saroya really used it. So a lot of those things, they're actually practical. You think that this is sort of stylish and that, and then you see that actually, no, they are really practical. So the first thing as you do is this angles that usually it's almost two directional lines. It's just two of them, two main directional lines that are going to establish almost that whole energy of your painting, of your work. And here it's this cut of Chelsea's hair and that head inside, revealing So this first sort of then deduced to almost this abstract underpinning of that, just that first masses of form. There is always form inside, but there comes into this masses, and then masses comes into shapes. They arrange themselves into shapes, and then we read those shapes. So always seeing the shape-form relationship, form underneath of the shape, a form collected into shapes. You know, it's form shaped. That form shape is always that great thing to look and to discover. There's my study over there, a little quick study of ideas. How I wanted to do that. What if you turn just a little head towards me? Just a little. Yeah. Yeah. Somewhat like that. Somewhat like that. Yeah. That tilt is good. I think that tilt somewhere here is very good. You can never under measure. Just breathe in, breathe out. Measure, think when you can. Because if it's whenever you can. Because at some point when you cannot, when you're in plein air, when you're in a condition when that's when you will have plenty of those. But whenever you can, you measure. What we did is just mix a little bit of paint, essentially all that same palette. Essentially what you do if you just mix with your brush, but just I like to have these chunks of the same paint. It's almost all of this stuff that I have together in various shifts and combinations. And as you do, this gaining up the values and this temperature shifts which are there, and as you do then in paint and develop, you just give this, this additional, just shift it, whether it's, how exactly cool, how exactly warm it is, where exactly it's in a value. So it's almost from outer rim of the palette where all my paints are. Now it's just this step into this already tonality. Essentially, this is tonality with that, temperature shift. And now, as you paint, as you would start painting, and canvas itself would start dictate how this mixes, how they all really start balancing off each other. Because again, it's a visceral medium. Never forget, painting is visceral. Okay, now we'll just get into that painting thing. So at that stage, there's so many different ways of paint, painting out of grisaille, building up slowly, building up right away out of black and out of shadow and light, or building up out of this, coloristic mid-tone. And my dad called that stage a pancake. That's how he would paint most of his work. He would just load that main value, coloristic value of the face and coloristic and tonal all at the same time, giving it its scale, and then pulling the image from inside of it. And I went through various stages. I just complete through my school years. I was absolute, grisaille maniac. We were just absolute, just ferocious. It was just like a cult or religion. And then, even before that, I could show. I have some old works. And then you go again as more you understand grisaille and building the form, then suddenly you understand how inherent alla prima is within that grisaille, within that first layer. And that's what I start seeing in Veronese. It's this, in Venetian school, this incredible, essentially great alla prima skills that go within inside of multi-layer approach. And you can see this incredible alla prima, the way Richard Schmidt expanded incredibly alla prima thinking is remarkable. Just so many great stuff going on right now in our art world. The way, that's almost whole other theme to talk about. This great collective knowledge that this great generation of fantastic painters that live today and practice today acquired and keep acquiring and keep growing. And that's to continue this conversation. It's painterly conversation. When when we paint with Jeremy and Tony, it's such a that conversation, whether it's over the glass of wine, over food, or in painting, it's one of the most exciting thing the art world knows. Because on the one hand, painting is isolated, and it's isolated in terms of very personal completely personal affair. It's a very, 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 very solitary pursuit. On another hand, it's the most collective, it's the most communal, it's the most togetherly and brotherly way of life, because we communicate. It's so great to see what this great artists today do. What Scott Burdick is painting, all this new work. What Ross Franzen is doing. It's just, there's such a fantastic painters, and it's a conversation that goes on right now that you see and you enjoy so much. Ignatic, a great friend. It's a great friend. It's personal. It's Jacob Collins, what Jacob is doing in New York, and Chris Puglisi. It's just a wonderful, wonderful community, a family that we have, a family of knowledge. And different ways, there is no single way, but there are principles, and how those principles reveal themselves through this incredible individual findings of each of these great masters of our time. You know, it's just fascinating. Tony's new painting that he did for CEC Art Show was just sensational, that he did of this Italian Dante performer when we went in Florence. Jeremy's beautiful things. You know, all these great artists that are painting today, it's just what makes our life so fantastic and rich and beautiful. And collective. It's collective affair. Personal, 100% personal, 100% individual, and yet so communal. So once you establish the values and look at these temperatures, you essentially, you know, you work around the form happening. So you're sort of loading up with that range. What range is this? Where are we? Where are we painting? Yeah, exactly. So I'm sort of trying to see that, yeah, exactly the level of my foreshortening. Because I like that look, sort of looking down, this graceful look from above that Chelsea has. So, and on this stage, just try to get my position and foreshortening of that, of the proportions of their normal kind of measurement is really important. But then, you know, you can move it around. And Chelsea has such a noble features, really noble features, noble in such a great way. And that's why I just love, just painting her. Again, we have this look, really close look at Chelsea. So we're painting Chelsea. It's always sort of like a mantra, trying to remind yourself, we're painting Chelsea. It's not a model. It's not, it's not still life. It's not landscape that we paint. Even then, taking this to a different level, and then it's almost addressing anything you paint like that, because everything has that soul in it, an individual personality. And even if you do paint a still life, remember, it's a still life. It's still alive. It's life that just simply slowed down, but there is life to that. Means this is a perspective. This is a, it has individuality to it, and character to it, and spirit of life in it, into everything. So once you start treating everything as this sacred vessel of life, See, and slowly, I mean, you move from my long ivory flats and to mongooses, because they move the paint around once you get it over there, sort of enough material to play with. And you sort of always want to, as you paint, you go through pairs. Everything comes in pairs, and you want to get that structure in pairs. All form has its answer on the other side of that center axis. And by the way, Chelsea, whenever you feel like, because this is, again, this is not an easy pose. It's not a comfortable pose. Comfortable poses are boring to look at, to me. That's the whole point, that the pose is difficult, means that there is a movement to it. There is and there is always a movement. So to see this poses, to catch that movement of the person, and if you like that, then the give up that you absolutely have to do, you have to understand that the model, the person, moves, and it's supposed to move. So it's impossible, like in classes and now in academy, if you would just start complaining about, oh, model just moved. I mean, of course, when the model cannot hold the pose, that's a whole another story. But if just a slight movement, and our teacher would say, well, back to the cast class. So you have to keep that, and the messing up is sort of, normal part in that process, because you're messing up and you figure it out, and you move that, recover from that, and that becomes a process of painting. So it's not, so that one of the powerful and engaging things of that alla prima, of drawing as you go, is what it does. It takes away from that, sort of feel up when you do a beautiful drawing, and then you think sort of, why paint then? If drawing is already there and it's already beautiful, then it's like a feel in. So to figure out how to draw as you paint, draw while painting, draw by painting. Now that's what we're talking about. Drawing through and by painting. In the process of painting. That's why drawing is the mother of all visual arts. And the painting is ultimate manifestation of that, because what you can do with this material, with the instant tonality, with the instant temperature, and then shaping the form through control of the edges from sharper to softer to lost, and controlling exactly the way of it. It just simply more efficient way of doing that amazing phenomenon of form meeting light. This great events that happens at that meeting. You paint what you want. You always do what you want. You don't think of anything but what you want, because if you start taking into consideration anything but what you want, it's almost like a little bit, kind of like cheating both yourself and, client or the viewer at the end of the day. Because what's the client? Client is the viewer. We have viewers. And some viewers just love what they see so much that they want to look at that all the time. So it's always a viewer. It's a connection between us and through our subject. into the subject. It's almost like paraphrasing that great mountain climbing through drama and adventure into thin air, with the same intensity as into thin air. It's really into the subject. We're entering into the world of our subject, nothing less, nothing less than that. Into thin air of reality, of that incredible sensation of being that in this particular instance, Chelsea gracefully allowed us to go. Thank you, Chelsea, again. It's all about Chelsea right now. It's not about anything else. It's all about Chelsea. This is Chelsea. What is Chelsea? Chelsea, what are you? It's all about Chelsea. Many years from now, when all of us are gone, I want somebody who couldn't care less about me or Chelsea, hopefully, stop and look and meet Chelsea. So it's not about us, it has nothing to do with us, it has nothing to do. Artist is not about artist. Artist about the cause and the subject. Our subject is our cause. That's our mission. It's not about us. Our skill is in service of this incredible world. To be able to reveal its nature. Or some aspect of that, because this nature in its entirety will never be revealed. It's impossible. It's greater than the nature itself is greater than all combination of our beings, and yet it reveals itself in every one of these beings. That's what makes doing it so much fun. So what happens is that this base tonality layer, my dad's pancake, is what keeps tonally unified all these things that we go in the development stage once we go into the subject, into the form, and as we develop, that bottom layer is what keeps it solid, what keeps it from this family, what keeps it here. as you go and as you discover inside of that fabulous subject, you just go through this great revelations, and every shift and call that you make based on just deciding on that shift is essentially becomes a point of revelation and discovery of something. And that's why it's endless fun. Endless fun. My dad painted every day of his life and still paints. And when he paints, you know that there is no age. He's 90 right now. He wakes every morning at 4 in the morning. He walks, and by 7 he paints. Every day. And when he paints, he is 20. So all that is subjective. So I guess when Dali was saying painter paint, that's what he meant. It's really capturing the life force itself. We're depicting the life force. There are many ways, reasonable or spiritual way of translate it or say it, or the language of modern science, or the language of philosophy, or in the language of spiritualism. And again, we come close, I think, to something which is darker, and this, which is such a great thing that Richard brought. Simple formula, brilliant in its completeness and simplicity. Richard came one of the most powerful painting theory of the 20th century, probably. So this is, listen what Richard says, read his book. Oh, his Alla Prima is phenomenal, but not necessarily attempt what he does. Do it your own way. Try to do your own way what he shares with you. It's brilliant.
Hey, would you like to win a beautiful painting worth almost $3,000? We've got a beautiful Joe McGurl plein air study that he's done of the sunset in Maine. It's gorgeous. If you want to have an opportunity to win it, go to paintinggiveaway.com. Just put in your email. That's all you've got to do, and you only need to enter once. We'll be giving away the prize at the end of May. Go to paintinggiveaway.com.
Always form inside, but there comes into this masses, and then masses comes into shapes. They arrange themselves into shapes, and then we read those shapes. So always seeing the shape-form relationship, form underneath of the shape, a form collected into shapes. There is the value progressions. Just like there is a value drop in a light, there is a value increase in a shadow. So it's not a detail in a shadow. There is not something, but there is this determined by the spacing and form, value increases. Value increases. Value drops in light and value increases in the shadow. And then inside of that, it fires up inside. You're fortunate enough to hold these magical devices, which are our brushes, to have our paints, to have our canvas, to have our subjects, and to throw it all there and look and learn and always, always, always feel the sensation and the joy that it comes and brings back to you. Thank you very much.
Well, that was from Techniques of the Russian Masters with Alexey Steele. You can learn more about that at lilyartvideo.com. Now let's get to an interview with Alexey. We're here at the studio in Carson City, California, right outside of Los Angeles, or part of Los Angeles, at the studio of Alexey Steele. And I thought we should sit down and just have a chat, learn a little bit more about you. So, thanks for having me here.
Great to have you, Eric. It's always wonderful.
You're a great host.
Oh, well, thank you. It's always great to have you as well as all group of our friends in the studio. And whenever we get together, that's what it's all about. It's all about camaraderie and exchange of ideas.
Yeah, it really is. You know, as we watch your life unfold on Facebook or on YouTube or through other things that you're doing, your blog and so on, you know, it looks like you're living the dream. It looks like you have this romantic life, much like we think of the lives of the Impressionists back when they were all hanging out together in cafes in Paris, only now it seems like you're hanging out together in the cafes of Los Angeles.
Eric, it's absolutely true. It's really in some way the magic of today's media that we can just be what we are and be yourself and be out there all at the same time. But I really feel enormously fortunate because to the depth of my soul, I live my dream. The greatest fortune I think one can ever hope for and be grateful for is to the absolute most and deepest and most perfect extent to be your own dream. When your life is becoming an embodiment of your dream. I'm very fortunate in that respect, and if any definition of success I could ever think about, regarding anybody, I would always look at that. So you kind of cut on that. I'm very fortunate and I'm very grateful for being able to do that. Things that I dreamt of since I was maybe 5-6 years old, I'm getting to do. Exactly the way I like them. Things that I love seeing around, be surrounded by, I'm surrounded by. You know, and it is very true, but it's also the timing that we live in is phenomenal. It feels that parallel to Paris feels more true than just even simple metaphor, because that's exactly what I felt, because our time today is enormously similar to the events that led to these great cultural changes at the turn of the last century. And I feel enormous parallel to what we have right now. And yes, we're fortunate with that sense of friendships and camaraderies among the greatest talents of the visual art world has today, and our art world, our representational realist art world has today. It is in every conceivable way parallel and adequate to the best what we read in book. When we read in books, we live now collectively, because that exchange of ideas leads to creation of the great art at the stage of new development and a new radical reshifting in culture at large, society at large, and art world in particular. It's great to be part of it.
You know, it seems to me, I've been in and around the art world for about 10 years pretty actively since I started the first of the magazines, and have been watching what has been happening in Los Angeles especially. And we tend to think in America as New York being the center of our culture, and certainly it is. There's a lot of great things that are going on in the schools, the ateliers in New York. But from a figurative standpoint, Los Angeles in this LA basin has really caught on fire. And I wonder what really started that out. My sense is that the California Art Club had a lot to do with that, and them elevating the quality. And you know, as one who does not live any longer in California, I look at Pasadena and the area around there and all the events that they're doing for the artist and helping the artist grow and having the competitions. Talk to me about how this all began.
Well, Eric, I think there is two parts to your great question, because this question is something that I think a lot. Partial answer to this question about 20 years ago is responsible for me being actually ending up coming from Soviet Union and ending up in Los Angeles and not in New York. Though I love New York very much. New York is very much similar in a lifestyle and its pace of life to Moscow. In every conceivable way, New York would seem to be obvious choice and LA is not. But from the moment I got to see LA and got to sink in the first 6-8 months, I realized that Los Angeles is a frontier, and it was way back. In its last 20 years, it really did grow into that global center. And there is a couple of issues that are responsible for that. I think it's much more open. California in general, Los Angeles in particular, being this great great cosmopolitan city, but it has a very different personal culture. It's much more the camaraderie, the personal hangout culture is much more inducive to Los Angeles than it is in New York. It's much more personally open, just culturally. It just happened to be lifestyle because of some leisure of that lifestyle, and who knows. But it definitely feels that. First part, which is huge part. Second part is talent is treated in and that's what I felt right away. That was the first that I noticed. The talent is treated in Los Angeles like a stocks in New York. You know, in New York, art is still, it's essentially a toy of bankers, because New York is a city of bankers. It stopped being a city of artists. It used to be a city of artists in the 50s, and at that point, it was the heart of the art world of the time. But the moment it became really a city of hedge funders killed art in many senses, more senses than one. So the moment, you know, hedge funders moved in Soho, you know, and all this, the art was pushed out to periphery out there. And Los Angeles, and New York is still a great cultural center, of course, but it doesn't move anywhere. There's this, I sense that sense of stalemate there. But in Los Angeles, it's boiling, it's a boiler, it's a train that pushes forward in a new millennium, and now we're in this new millennium. That's what I felt, and it was enormously attractive to me. And in that sense, I'm calling for the last 15 years Los Angeles a Paris of 21st century. Because your first question, yes, I feel enormous connection. That is what was happening in Paris, is happening here. And back to your second part of your question, one of both, a product, I think, of that preset culture, and once it emerged, a driver of that events in Los Angeles became the phenomena of California Art Club. California Art Club would go in the history book as one of the seminal events, I think, at the end of the 20th century in art in America, in galvanizing our great movement. And it's really based on this culture of openness in California. That's why it's a California Art Club. It has this great legacy in history. Again, see, for some reason, the history of camaraderie of artists in California goes back. So, and California Art Club is actually organizational, institutional representation of that phenomena. And when dear friend Peter Adams, a wonderful California artist and gentleman and dearest friend, and his wife Elaine took over that, literally, it's a venerable institution, but at that time through the 60s it went through this decline, and took over it in the 90s. And I was fortunate enough to be one of the first artists that Peter invited into the club as this sort of taking and bringing new life into this new historic stage in our club's development. So I saw that growing. It's all in front of me. That format of essentially of friendships that were built around these activities, the way it became a format for bringing artists together, for artists to interact, to paint together, to be together, to go out, our trips, our painting trips together. It's really provided the foundation on which all this tight group of today's greatest, hands down, greatest artists, figurative artists emerged as a part, because primarily California Art Club is stands on the wonderful and venerable plein air tradition of California, plein air painters. But a plein air is a very specific breed. I was sort of taught by my dad, a great figurative painter, but my beginning of training was plein air. Plein air is a heart and soul of that adventuresome spirit in art and going into nature. So that going, packing trips together and painting out together, it's all galvanized and overimposed on this culture of openness in Los Angeles, brought this incredible long-term friendships that resulted, that gives that synergy. Art is an enormously individual and personal process, but at the same time it's enormously collaborative and collective process mentally. We need an environment of close thinkers who aesthetically and mentally are on the same page and looking for the same, to be able to, we progress together, we move forward together. That's what all art movement's all about. So the function and the contribution of the California Art Club to what happened in the last really 10 years with the emergence out of this group of this new nucleus of the young, great painters, figurative painters, of today, Jeremy Lipkin, Tony Pro, Ignat Ignatov. It's all close friends, and we go with our, we know each other for the last 15 years, and we know each other because of the club, and we're friends because of the club, really. We need institutions. There is a room for institutions, and since the institutions that properly serve that, like museums, curatorial, curatorial views, criticism, was not available for our art form, the alternative institutions took over. Right. So in large way, California Art Club took responsibilities that were failed by many other institutions.
We're trying very carefully to utilize the magazines as a nucleus.
And thank you for doing that.
To create this bonding and this togetherness, yes, and to look at the model of what Elaine and Peter have done with the California Art Club and look at ways that we can take some of that action on a national level. And though it's much more difficult to be able to have that hanging out factor, as you say, when you're living in Illinois and somebody else is living in New York, at least we can create some events where people can come together and they can make new friends and they can paint together and
like
bond.
Plein Air Conference.
Very like the Plein Air Conference, exactly. So we're trying to create that sense. We have a national awards program that is kind of modeled after what the California Art Club is doing. The idea of elevating the painters who enter that contest grow, and they strive to get in there and they strive to win those awards. And it brings the whole up. It makes everybody stronger as a result. And that's really what this is all about, is making everybody stronger as painters. Of course, because that's
raise water under the old boats.
That's right.
But it's almost different. It's not the water that raising under old boats somehow, meaning water comes. It's the boats somehow, by binding together, is somehow start raising up and inviting the water in. It's really, that's what moved art. Right. Art comes as the result of collective mental process. And thank you, Eric, for what your wonderful magazines are doing, because Fine Art Connoisseur and now Plein Air is really doing this great job with very, very few others, that essentially there is a need for institutions. There is in a society. That's what the institutions are there for. Institutions are to provide format that allow culture to grow. You know, museums, theaters, universities, academy, and now to bringing back to fulfilling that void, institutional void, that our art form had by providing and building new institutions like this, like magazines. It's an incredible outcome. And on the pages, to see that, you know, there is such a great importance to have that critical view in a real sense, in a knowledgeable sense, to be able to see the latest, greatest achievements by this great artist that we're surrounded by. I cannot overstate the excitement and the importance of the fact that because of all this collective effort, a remarkable group of top artists to any measure now emerged in the realist art in America. And thank you for doing your part in that.
Well, thank you. When we first started the magazines, the first magazine, we really felt as though there was not anyone highlighting quality, that everything was about the lowest common denominator, not the highest. And magazines in the art world had a tendency to be designed for that average consumer who might want to do a little bit of collage work or a little bit of modern or a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And we felt as though the beginnings of this movement were really starting to take hold, and we wanted to kind of champion that, be the standard bearer, carry the flag, and say, let's move forward, let's go in this direction. And that's ultimately why we created Fine Art Connoisseur, because we wanted something that highlighted what was happening in the world, because the mainstream press was not giving this any attention, and still for the most part is
and
not.
It still does.
And yet this movement, in the 10 years that I've been at this movement has been going straight up, and it's moving in a very positive direction, thanks to people like you, thanks to your friends here in California and some great artists around the country, in New York and other places. We're starting to get some notice, and I believe that the generation that you are a part of, and the kids, the younger people who are following you, are going to reap the big rewards, because my sense is that you guys, you ladies, are going to be the ones who are ultimately the big sellers 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. You're going to be the biggest stars in the art world. I'm not trying to be anti-modern art or anti-squirt gun art. I think that's
we're way past that.
Yeah,
we're way past divide good art, bad art.
No, it's not about that, and we can't marginalize anything else.
Exactly.
But that's been what's happened to us.
Exactly, but what we certainly are, we're quit taking being marginalized.
Right.
We're not there to marginalize anybody. We will not repeat the mistakes of the past. We're not a new righteous movement that will take over all bad movements.
Right.
That's how it happened in art history always.
Right.
There was the revolution that came, which is my thing, revolution that came, the revolution that we witnessed, the revolution that we're all part of, is actually not even the fact that the realism is coming on scene. The true revolution is the real fundamental structural change in the way art world functions now for the first time ever, because before it was always single righteous mode, no matter what. It's this one righteous movement of the time today. What is the righteous movement of today? That doesn't longer apply.
No.
The system of today's establishment, postmodernist establishment, collapses, not because postmodernism itself even bad. That's another story. It's because it's built, it still sits on old, outlived its usefulness totalitarian model. Totalitarian model is collapsing in the pluralistic and diverse society. So strangely, culture and art and cultural institutions still sit on a complete totalitarian model, Victorian totalitarian model, that has no place or no right to exist in a newly diverse, truly diverse society on the ground. So what we're talking about is to institutions reflecting true aesthetic diversity on the ground, embracing and looking what is really there, not artificially inventing through this Yale School couple of programs that are plugged into the proper galleries, but what is really happening on the ground. And back to your first question, which is fantastically important, that's what, look what's happening in LA, street art. Street art in LA is a fantastic driver of talents. You know, these taggers, bless their heart, I mean, they're vandalizing, they're doing sometimes not that pretty good things, but what an incredible burst of a true creative force and talent, visual talent is there. I was privileged, I did a little program with some group of kids that were from gang background, I mean, trying to get away through faith-based programs and initiatives through art. I was so touched by that. But that is, it's a true, there are a great number of true expressions today, and some of that directly opposite to what we do. And that's fine because they're authentic voices. Now, if we talk to hawks like Damien Hirst and Koons, who are to me represent the pure disingenuous worst of the thing, commercialism. It's a pure commercialism. We're not talking about that. You know, there is a, you know, it's not about political correctness, but true to the heart, they're fantastic, genuine expressions that you could see across the aesthetic board. And this big groups that bound by their internal principles exist today, and one of those fantastic, equal partner in culture groups, but wide, powerful, and upsurging, is definitely American realism.
Yeah. And the internet has a lot to do with that,
sure.
because we're really being able to expose it. No longer is the power in the hands of
Absolutely.
one or two curators or organizers. Now the
That's
power
what
is in
killed
the
that
hands
power.
of the people.
Exactly.
And as you see what's happening and how this is spreading and how people are now realizing, gee, it's okay to like this, because we've been told that if we don't understand something, then we must be cretins. We must not have the intellect to understand it. And of course, that's just silly.
It's a poor imposition.
Yeah.
It's a poor imposition of the power of a middleman that was driving.
And the
that.
middleman no longer really exists, and we're moving into a world where the middleman will cease to exist even more. What I'd like to do is to jump backwards. Let's talk about Alexey Steele as a young boy. Now, you're about to have twins, and your life is about to change dramatically. And so what I want to do first is to take you back to your first memories of art. Your father was an artist.
My father is
Your
an
father
artist.
is an artist. He's a great artist. He's one of the legends of Russia. And so talk to me about your first memories of art.
Well, strangely enough, when I tried to think about first memories of art, it's kind of got me thinking, I have this strange fascination with the large-scale works. You know, we're sitting in my darkened studio here, but over there on the wall hangs a work that's kind of important to me. It's my first semester in school after being admitted to Surikov. And for the first semester project, it's a still life, even in a highbrow school. So for the first semester still life, instead of doing normal still life, I did that's 6.5 feet, enormously complex composition. So and from that point on, I mean, I was proclaimed that incurable gigantomaniac. So I always said, why do I have it? It's not necessarily this is anyway better, but why is it so personally important? And at some point I suddenly realized, when I was born, that very year, my dad was working on the greatest painting of his life, on this remarkable The Land that he was working for 10 years on, which is a 12-foot painting. So first thing, right out of hospital, I was brought to the studio office, and apparently, according to the room, my dad just bringing me in. First thing he did, he accidentally dropped me in the pallet. to the complete horror of everybody, just boom, put it right in a fresh pallet.
That explains a lot. I think a little of that seeped in through your skin.
So my paints, the physical joy of messing with paints, and what we talked about as we paint, it's just the physical joy of paint. It probably has something to do with that. But probably my first memory, even before any of my own memory, is this vast canvas. Because imagine because that was right at that time standing in his studio. He was working on that, and just probably my proto memory is just imagine what it for the newborn 12-foot canvas. So I have a prototype of a 100-foot canvas in my brain as something to fill in. So I'm perfectly ready, to be 100-foot canvas, no big deal. I could do that. So that probably my dad working on the greatest painting of his life is perhaps the single most important and the first memory of my life.
Well, and interestingly enough, I'm always telling artists they need to paint larger paintings. They're oftentimes complaining that they can't make any money, but it's hard to make money on 9x12 paintings. And expressing yourself in large canvas makes such a big difference, and it has such a much more impact. And the first time I visited your studio, this is probably my 4th or 5th visit here now, but the first time I visited, I remember just marveling, looking around the room. I'm looking up at things now that are magnificent in terms of the size and the structure of the canvases. And it's something that very few people in the world are doing today.
Well, yes, Eric, and I have to point out, it's yes and no. What you say has so much truth in it, but at the same time, you have to know, it's not that bigger is better by any means. I'm first one to say, because bigness of painting is not necessarily in size, because Vermeer is as big as it gets on 6x9. It's bigness of design, bigness of a concept, bigness of execution, big grandness. That's what's important. Now, that is very important to understand, because if it's not yours, if it's just simply getting another big canvas and doing a steroid, horrible, dead, big piece, there is nothing worse than a big piece that didn't happen.
A big piece done badly.
Yeah, so it's not for everybody. And it doesn't have to be for everybody. That's why in Surikov, in my school, which is I'm so infinitely and indefinitely proud of being part of, just as my dad is a graduate of Repin Institute in Leningrad, a descendant of Imperial Academy. I was an enormous privilege to be a part of the Surikov family, which is Moscow. It's once you're there, it's this great venerable institution. Once you're West Point, you're West Point. Once you're Harvard, you're Harvard. Once you're Surikov, you're Surikov. That's that level. That's how.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's critically important. I was privileged to go to Russia probably 6 or 8 years ago for the first time, and was able to visit some of the academies, visit the artists, and really get a feel for the influence the Russians had on keeping the traditional methods or the heritage of hundreds of years, many generations of technique alive, when the rest of the world had abandoned them. In 1913, in the Armory Show, which was 100 years ago, modernism began in America, and those people were classically trained. But the second generation then were not classically trained. They were just taught, express yourself, throw the paint on canvas. But the others actually knew how to paint, and they had that foundation before they became modernists. Today's modernists don't necessarily have the foundation. And what the Surikov and the Russian Academy in general, the system in Russia, kept alive by Joseph Stalin, maybe one of the good things that he did in his life, has really had an impact on the world.
It was coincidence.
You changed the world because of it, because they kept it alive, they took it to China. There were very few painters in America that maintained these traditions. Thank goodness we have the people like Richard Schmidt and Daniel Green and some of these classics,
so grateful
but very few of them. So talk to me about the Russian Academy, the system, what you had to go through to learn to become an artist, And talk a little bit about the importance of that system.
Well, that's a great big question. It's hard to answer in a tight sort of blocks on that. It's a big issue because it consists of few elements. We should not forget that modernism, one of the first originators of modernism, was Russia. At the same time as it was happening in Paris, modernism happened in Russia 50 years before it happened in America. In America, it's journey come later. You know, what Malevich was doing in 1905, you know, Black Square, 1907, you know, it's directly Russian modernism is at the building block. This is the building block of modernism.
But the difference was that when modernism hit America, Americans abandoned realism.
Exactly.
The Russians did not.
Well, Eric, not so. Not so. Not so. That's why we have to. History is a very important kind of watchdog. It's history watches over us, and we better pay attention to history and learn from it. Not making too big of a conclusion, but learn from that. Modernism, that authentic original modernism, was part of a revolutionary movement. It was part of that original revolutionary movement. That were the brilliant thinkers, visionaries. I am first to consider Malevich one of the greatest visionary geniuses of the 20th century. He foresaw the entire direction of the 20th century. I say it always and always and always. At the same time, that way of thinking, they were actively thinking about radically changing the world through social revolt and social re-engineering. That was the purpose, their intellectual underpinning of Russian Revolution. So they were the first commissars that came in swept with Bolsheviks, were modernists. Tatlin, Malevich, they were commissars with guns on their belts. We forget that conveniently. It's something, if you look at that, but it's exciting. It's all perfect sense if you look at that era. You know, they were Dantons and Robespierres of that time, much like David was. They were revolutionaries. They were building new world. They were destroying old world. And they were destroying that old world viciously, efficiently, and consciously. Academy that you visited in St. Petersburg, you know, I live on memories of these times from these old people. What happened to Russia happened to me. I'm from there, have a great personal connect. That's where I'm from. I love where I am right now, and I love where I'm from. It's all things together in me, you know. But what happened in Russia, and the great tragedy of revolution, happened to me. Now, modernism was part of that tragedy. It was part of perpetrators of this tragedy. If you wrote what Chagall was writing in The Art of Commune, he was a commissar in Vitebsk in 1917. I happened to read what he was writing. You know, these people were in charge of distributing in the middle of hunger, right, in 1918, 1920, 21. They were redistributing food stamps among artists. So who's going to get one and who's not going to get one was, you know, so that's literally a power of life and death. So, and they were eradicating old reactionary art that celebrated the individual. That individualism was consciously thought to be ripped out of the fiber of society, because we need mass. We need mass. We need new great world where everybody is a little particle in the big machine. Orwellian world that they built was professed by the great visionaries of modernism.
Not individualism.
Not anti-individualism. Modernism always been from the get-go anti-individualism. Anti-individualism. It's subjugation of dismantling of the individual to the particle of a mass.
Right.
That's why, you know, that was the part of, you know, that was the progression of 20th century dismantling of the individual. and creation of mass consumer society at the end, mass producing, mass consuming society. Oh, you're cutting me on my topic, but but that's very important when you go about history of tradition and talking about that art that became official art, to remember those origins. So the old revolution, so the memories of Imperial Academy in Rapin, because that was completely associated. It was Imperial Academy, for God's sakes. It was almost destroyed first. The students were crushing this priceless casts that Tsar ordered around the world directly from the greatest masterpieces that now is impossible. I mean, Russia owns 2 original, or 3 I think, original collections of casts of every greatest sculpture in the world. So, and Academy of St. Petersburg was that depository. The inner yard.
And I've been there, and I've seen the cast collection, which is the most phenomenal cast collection I've ever
so
seen.
luckily they preserved the casts, but luckily they preserved the molds. But the casts that were the enormous amount of the casts, they were chiseled down. That was the art training, to chisel down the cast until they filled that whole inner yard, and they could not do anymore. So these are the memories we grew up with. So tolerance was not a high trait of modernism, was not. That's why when I say we will not do that, I mean what I say. This is not, we know that this road doesn't go. It's not a takeover one over another, because modernists experience that. Now, when a transition happened and when Stalin took power and there was the whole redistribution, side effect of Stalin consolidating his power and wanting to get rid of all original revolutionaries led him to pull out this group on the one side, on an internal side, but on another side, he had to find a party. Once they bumped into all these horrible programs of killing the entire classes of peasants and all that, they had to figure out the way to communicate to the public.
Now, wasn't there a meeting where the modernists were trying to become officially adopted art when Stalin came into power?
Well, there was a lot of this because they were officials. Because they were, they were officials. They were the officials of the revolution, the connoisseurs of the officials of the revolution that were essentially pushed aside as Stalin started to place his own people. And since he wanted to push all this group of original revolutionaries,
he needed his own power.
Yeah, he pushed, and in that way he started slowly, but very slowly, because it was always for the first time until they invented the concept of socialist realism. So in a way to rehabilitate realism from old bourgeois past. Right. But it really was fully rehabilitated and fully brought to the academy only after the World War II. So the generation of my father is a fortunate generation right after the World War II, when Stalin, won the war, basically when they realized not on the ideas of communism, but addressing national feelings and national sentiment of the people. It was not the war, even though they were running for the motherland for Stalin, but it really was that sense of its protect Russia, not Soviet system, that the people were dying for in this enormous, disgracefully enormous amounts. Nobody still knows 50 million people, up to some accounts. So after that, realizing that you need a voice, that's somehow a voice of consensus, that can communicate to the people, that became art. So yes, on the one part, they engaged it as a propaganda weapon, of course, showing and portraits of Comrade Stalin and Comrade that, and to do this, you need to know how to have a Comrade Stalin shaking hands. You have to know how to paint hands. But on a much deeper level, they realized they need also art that just speaks to people. That just speaks to people, and that Russian realism was enormously popular art form. That exhibitions, the great exhibitions in the 50s and 60s, drew hundreds of thousands of people.
Showing the happy life, right?
Showing the life.
Showing the life, but wasn't it reflecting, didn't Stalin really encourage showing how life was good in Russia and the happy farmers and the happy people?
It was, but you don't forget that it was 50s. in the 50s, the genuine excitement of victory, a genuine excitement of happiness among ruins, but the sensation of victories was so honest and strong that a lot of this complete optimism of the 50s was 100% genuine. Now, in the 60s, it turned sour.
What year were you born?
I was born in 67.
1967.
Yeah. In the 60s came what became known as severe style, and my dad was right there at the origin, starting at 1958, and that was rethinking that happiness and seeing that bluntly, that it's sort of sobering view of reality.
So your dad was in a very special time and a very special place in the academy.
Very much so.
Tell me about the effect of what happened to your father and his work and his life, which ultimately led you to where you are.
My dad, it's just one of the greatest privileges of life and greatest fortunes of life is, of course, being a son of a dad like my dad is. Incredible true artist to the bone, to the soul, iconically, just standing on his art, for his art, and nothing but his art, and putting his life entirely on the way for it. He was a star student at Repin Academy, at Repin in Leningrad. His drawings, his class studies there are still probably pinnacles of academic development. I will show you And that article in Fine Art Connoisseur, by the way, was quite spectacular by Peter Trippi. And by the way, Eric, having somebody with the knowledge and understanding of Peter Trippi and his level of deep perception and based on this remarkable knowledge that he has in academic art is phenomenal. This is a great asset to our community.
Thank you. We feel very privileged that Peter's part of the organization. We have the distinction of most art magazines are edited by professional editors. We actually have a curator. He was a museum curator in it. So it makes a huge difference.
The piece that he wrote on my dad was just touching. Was so dead on, deeply dead on from the inside out artist's point of view. So that was sensational. So, and that the images that are there of my dad's academic work, they're just sensational. That the height of that period of the 50s was almost never really reached in that particular incarnation. It's a pinnacle of academic drawing and academic figure studying. Live figure studying to a very large degree. So my dad is part of the very special privilege, that very special group, and then his whole life he carried, and the way he developed out of this academic understanding of forms, then how he freed himself, he went into this thick painting and informed that understanding of forms and values, and then condensed with this enormous interpretation of color with complete sense of value that gave him that. And the way then he progressed, almost every decade he would drastically change. He would just keep going forward. And then he, after that, painting this enormously beautiful, thick, painterly thing, then he started to go into design and this multi-figure, and that's what became one of the originators of the severe style. So having my dad and seeing that, and that being part of my personal history, that quest for the grand form, that's back to your first also original question of my science of scale. My desire for scale comes out of that embedded institutional desire, particularly Leningrad, St. Petersburg Academy, Imperial Academy, institutional priority, institutional memory of grandness of style, grandness of expression, of the deepest and highest pinnacle of that visual achievement. It's like climbing Mount Everest. I call that large figurative works a Mount Everest of art. Why are you doing that? And just like Edmund Hillary said, it's just because it's there.
Because it's there.
So that's what you do, and deeply inside that, Why I'm doing this? Because that's part of my genetic makeup, my institutional makeup. That's what was considered greatest of the great, and a measure of that. And knowing that you can find that greatness in every size and form, but being able, if there is an ability to do so, on the scale that just excites and exudes. It's sensational. So Russian art, on the one hand, this incredibly strong figurative school, but also phenomenal plein air school, phenomenal plein air tradition that became enormously strong. And again, my dad was one of the pioneers in the 50s, just going out in the field. It was started taking off really in the 50s.
And my understanding in the Russian Academy system, plein air is very much important if you're a figurative artist.
Absolutely.
And here we have a tendency to categorize it, say, oh, they're plein air painters, they're figurative painters, when in reality, even the people were encouraged to go out, not encouraged, required to go out and study for 2 months every summer in plein air and learn form and light and value and color, so it could be applied to the life form.
Yes, one of the key building blocks of Russian realist school as it is, its combination of academic figure from the history of the Imperial Academy, and plein air and realism and what is known as naturalism, 19th century, and Repin and Serov. That marriage of these two forms is completely organic to the Russian Academy, to the degree that my dad in Academy, they had various studios. My dad came to the studio with a specifically plein air figure. It was built in the garden. Glass studio was built in the garden of the Academy. So students could paint figure inside, but in plein air. So all of his studies, the horsemen, that people, double, triple figures, in the middle of winter, in a full surrounded, that is to such a degree, that's probably a culmination, but that philosophy of a complete closeness of plein air experience and a figurative experience, because that's what freshes your color, that's what lets you understand deeper how the values influence color. That's really parallel value and form and color and compositional arrangements and the sensation of space and light that plein air gives you. There's a two an undividable form. And another interesting thing, let me just, just on a little other note, and based on the importance of that school, the unique part of the school that became that socialist realism became to represent, was the look at the common man. It's one of the most unique schools in the history of art that the bulk of the creative figurative effort was sort of pointed at the look at the common man of society. So the great net positive, outside of the efforts of propaganda and all that, but the great amazing contribution of that realist school, one of the most powerful realist school of 20th century, is this incredible plein air. And first and foremost, the common man of society, outside of any material thing, outside of any type of commercial interaction involved. Look at the nobility and the life of the people of the land.
One of the things that I think is really critical to emphasize here to the figurative painters who might be viewing this is that plein air is very critical in the development of figurative painting.
Absolutely. That's, by the way, that comes back to the California Art Club. That's why California figurative art is such a unique phenomena, because it really rests on that great California plein air tradition and merging new figurative skills, that learned figurative skills with this great tradition of plein air in California. That's why that Russian approach is somehow philosophically is enormously similar to the
It's all linked, and I was pleased at the plein air convention to see artists out there who were painting figures outdoors, which of course is part of the tradition in Russia. Now let's talk briefly about the differences between training today in America and training in Russia. The academy system in Russia is my understanding, a lot of training before you can even get to be one of the 28 people accepted in the Serkov. And then that Sarikoff is a 6-year program, and then there is, my understanding, even an additional program some artists can get into after that. The versus training in America today. What I'd like to understand is what about that program should be done if you're studying art today, you want to become a great artist in America. What about that program? What disciplines should you be following, and what maybe isn't necessary?
Well, Eric, it's a very big, powerful, loaded question.
Thank you.
Very loaded question. Because essentially it talks about unpleasant thing of institutional prejudice in this country. The fact you cannot substitute academic system. Academic system of drawing on the highest level, drawing figure and painting figure every day, 3-hour drawing, 3-hour painting. And then instead of theory, we would skip and we do another 3 hours. So we would do 9 hours a day of training, of that. 7 days a week, no Sundays, no nothing. And you do this intensely, you do that intensely pretty much for first 3 years. Nobody takes it. But for first 3 years, you do that way. And then you start putting it and experimenting and putting it in your own works in the remainder of your stint. You cannot, under the basically, you know, like a Marines boot camp. I mean, it's not pleasant. That it's a total discipline. It's a do or die. It's a similar to Navy SEAL training. It's the death or the failure rate is atrocious. So that you cannot substitute with anything. That's what the academies are there for. Academic responsibility of the academy as an institution to provide that. The fact that the talents, genuine talents of this country, who are based on their personal choice and intelligence, who want to exercise this art form, is essentially marginalized and denied their right to be right for knowledge. Right. That's marginalization. Right. That is, we fully accept any art forms, but the single rule of the institutions and the exclusion of that type of knowledge as non-important and excessively forceful segregation and imposition on the culture of society, of a specific, of anybody's ideas. That's what we're up against.
And we're experiencing a revolution right now with many hundreds of young people who are studying.
Absolutely. And what happened, but the amazing thing happened. God bless America on one hand, and an amazing anthem to human nature. If you suppress, it will grow other way. You suppress it from the top, it will go sideways. What really happened, extraordinary thing happened in America. As the academy and the institutions suppress this is suppressed art form. This is forbidden art form. Forbidden. They make no mistake about it. We're anti-establishment and we're non-conformist movement. Every great talent in today's art world who achieved what they achieved, when they went the route that they took, made a conscious decision that they would be outsiders.
Well, the big difference, though, in Russia, if artists violated that, they were murdered.
No, they were not murdered.
I met an artist whose father was murdered because he painted something that Stalin didn't like.
Well, that would be another thing. I mean, doing something that would be considered politically incorrect. That's why the term politically correct has a very special connotation for me. I cannot stand that. I only use that with enormous glee because that was the term used in the Soviet Union, particularly in the early days, and punishment for being politically incorrect was death.
And we're seeing a lot of emphasis on political correctness in America now.
I cannot stand that, and that, and to a large degree, you see Home Sweet Home, you see a lot of traits, we're back to the USSR, and not to the best part of that, the ones that fail, provenly. That is what we're there to stand for, and, America was there for a good reason, and it sits on a certain foundations that I think worth preserving. And the amazing thing that happened as a result of that sort of social engineering in this country, in a cultural world of forbidding, of suppressing, and banning, essentially, from institutions or from any trace of realism. What happened, the individual, when this great collection of these great individuals decided to go follow that, and particularly we have a great, always and at every time, to give this great gratitude, great debt of gratitude to the generation that preserved that, to the generation of Richard Schmidt, to Bert Silverman, to Daniel Green, to all these great artists, realist artists in America, Andrew Wyeth, who really managed to do what they did in different ways, but particularly in some huge way, Richard Schmidt, in the way he managed to reach out and devise one of the most coherent visual theories probably of 20th century as far as realism is concerned. So, and the way he managed to reach across and give that support and look at his students, one of the greatest students, artists today, you know, Ross Franson and Scott Burdick. So this generation that preserved us, that carried the torch through the worst of that, we have to bow to them. But that generation that came after, that young generation that made their call, that found that knowledge, that built on it, that spent decades, couple of decades learning and figuring out, today gained knowledge that in some way we have our alternative academy today. I was just contemplating on that, and we have in a way a new form, cellular academy. Not vertical but horizontal academy, where different artists looking at a different aspect of visual image and working it out achieved enormous success, gained tremendous insights.
Right.
In every talk to my students, I cannot emphasize more than, guys, if you want to learn in America, you have an enormous opportunity. You have to go horizontally. You should go to all these great artists. Now, don't even think of imitating what they do, but tap into their knowledge. Listen what they have to say, because each of them developed a phenomenal part of our visual discipline to enormous degree. And collectively, today, we do have this academy. It's a new academy. It's a horizontal academy. It's a cellular academy.
Well, that's why we're doing videos. That's why
Yes.
we're really trying to encourage people. One of the things that bugs me so much is that you'll go out to the marketplace. I visited an art gallery recently, no names, and they had a particular artist who always sold. And I know this isn't always about selling, but this illustrates a very interesting point. They told me this artist always had sold before they hung it on the wall, and I went to the show and the artist was hanging there and it had not sold, and so I was kidding them a little bit and saying, how come this great artist hasn't sold? And they said, he's doing so many workshops and all of his students are copying his style. So now we have 30 other artists who can paint in that style for less money, and the collectors can't tell the difference. Now there is a difference, but the collectors can't. And so what has been happening with the workshop system is we're breeding copycats.
Exactly.
And we cannot have people who are becoming copycats of Richard Schmidt or Daniel Green or David Leffel. What we want to do is grab the best learning experience from them and then develop our own talent.
Eric, the reason I've been in some way resisting jumping in a teaching fray for years, I've been compelled, people asking me to teach for the longest time, but my rationale was, in absence of academic system that I came through, in absence of this forceful discipline, self-imposed discipline of the student, and the format of academy, there is no point. Only now, when I saw this great emergence of this great talents, I saw the conversation, and that's why I went into that and started my system of workshops for one particular reason, is to deliver that particular message.
It's critical.
One message, you learn how to learn. Don't try to imitate anybody. You would always be, because what's your priority? If you want to sell like this guy sells, you won't, because this is this guy. If you want to learn what this incredible artist learned, you can. So today, for example, look at what Jacob Collins is doing in New York. You can get one of the most remarkable drawing training that will be a foundation of what you do. Just go to Jacob. Go to Jacob. I almost, when you see Jacob demonstrate, when you see Jacob draw, it's fantastic. I feel home. That's academy. You know, and then you want to know, okay, but he runs specific program, just that. It's just figuring that academic drawing, giving you this. Then go around, then look, go see Rose France, and then see, and seek of all these events where this great artist teach, or Scott Burdick, or seek this great, and go to California to see, you know, Jeremy, you know, us, Tony, see every opportunity where you could get to see this. Go to Adrian Gottlieb, go to Adrian. You know, just this, and try not to imitate. Try to understand.
Right. Become yourself.
Understand the knowledge, the underlying principle that is being shared with you. There is one thing, successful painting. There is a unifying principles between all successful paintings despite all stylistic differences. That's why realist art is infinite. There is no single right way of doing it. There is only single principles to be achieved or not. Through my entire demo, this is the only message that I hope to bring across. That's what Academy teaches. Now, what is missing, Academy is doing this. Academy works on the fundamentals, distilled fundamentals outside personal style, right? But we can, because modern people are enormously intelligent. If you make a case to them and they would see and hear you and would think that this is, yeah, that makes sense, they would understand. So there is actually, that's new academy, this new cellular academy, our academy, requires such a dedication of individual.
It's a new way of learning.
It's a new way of learning.
It's a self-discipline. When I first started studying, I studied with one particular man who came from the Florence School, from Madame Samy, and from Frank Riley and Ives Gamble. And then I started studying, when I moved to California, I studied under several painters simultaneously. I'd go on Mondays to this one, and Tuesdays to that one, and Wednesdays to the others. And they all gave me grief about it. They said, you'll never find your way. No, I found more deeply because I wasn't becoming a clone of those individuals.
Read Alla Prima, for example.
Right.
Read Alla Prima and then go see Richard paint and hear him say, understand what he's saying. Richard is brilliant. Richard is absolutely brilliant. Richard is a brilliant artistic mind. That he developed the way what he does is not coincidental. He shares that with you. Listen to that. Don't try to imitate his stroke. It's impossible.
Right.
It's just, I mean, that's laughable. Richard, that's why Richard is brilliant. He can do that. And then he can say, but learn what brought him to that. What is he telling you? Read Alla Prima.
So I'm curious, growing up in the 1960s in Russia, I met young men your age in Russia who literally were starving. What was it like for you as a child?
Well, starving it was not. Just being fortunate. I'm very fortunate to be from a very, very kind of privileged upbringing, because my dad was a great and became a famous artist, but my step-granddad was a national academician, scientist, and the president of the university, president of the big big engineering school in Kiev. So our living room was a crossroad of top of the scientific and cultural world of that time in the Soviet Union. So my dad was a celebrity pretty much, but paying all the price for that, because my dad's story is a whole another story. He became what he was, being stubborn and as he is, on a completely unapproved ways, and that's not going through the ranks of the official system. He was one of the ultimate insider-outsider, that's how I call it. He was still within the official system, but because he did outside of the system, he was detested greatly. There was a whole fun, quite engaging and informative story. So I have every argument for and against state system controlling the art world. I know both sides
of that world.
Absolutely, on the personal way. So, but starvation there, yes, for so many people, it was the true challenge and exercising their art form. So the question why I came to America, that to me is so difficult to answer, almost impossible. It was this very, and I could never, outside of destiny and all this kind of spiritual ways of saying that, being with that incredible privileged background, and being an artist myself, and being surrounded by artists and friends, great artists, all my buddies today, one of the leading greatest artists of today in Russia. I'm part of fortune, just like my dad was part of the special generation in the 50s. I was part of the very special generation in the 80s. But in all our conversations, it was a very strange thought that, okay, nobody doubted my credentials, because being from the dead like that, that's a big responsibility. My dad was a friend from my big professor. My professor looked up to my dad because my dad was older, 3 years older, was cool in a way. And the drawing, this academic drawing, he would always quote kind of like my dad's academic drawing in our class. Oh, that was the drawing. What your dad did, now that's, you suckers, nothing. What your dad did, that was a drawing. All that is a baggage when you're with your friends, right? Just, okay, nobody doubts you. I mean, you're good. But look at us. We had to get here. You had everything with a silver spoon. You grew up in the studio like this, and that like that, and that like that, and that like that. You're good. I mean, it's not like you're talentless. Somebody who just because of your dad got to where you got. Nobody doubts that. They punched immediately.
You pretty much, your dad pretty much gave up everything when he came to America, didn't he?
Yes. So, but the question, that lingering question, what would you do if you were in our shoes? America gave me answer to that. Because America, this great equalizer, zeroing down to nothing, and suddenly you're nothing and nobody. Great equalizer, America. That's what can you do only depends on this and on this. Now that is an enormous, that's a freedom, that's liberation. So that sense of what you said, that some people did starve, and how do you make with the talent? What would you do with your talent, and how can you do it and make it despite all? It's enormous part of the art world, and how much of that, and what is your value? How much of what you believe in are you willing to trade for the benefits? I'll tell you, one of the greatest stories of my artistic life was on the point of, I mean, not starvation, but when a 10 cents suddenly feels like a big money in your pocket. I remember that. And right about around that time, suddenly a big white Mercedes, and it just arrives, and because it just people know, start bringing people, and the big, no names, of course, but because I don't think they're even in business anymore. But gallery, posh gallery in a posh part of Beverly Hills, coming in and looking at your work that you do. Oh, great! And you're showing this work, and you're showing this. Great! Oh, good! Wow! Quite a scale. Whoa! Yeah! Whoa! You can do well. You can do that. And then a little kind of, oh yeah, great. And then a little thing comes. Check this out. And the catalog of the gallery comes in. Oh, you can do this 10 a month. Grand a piece. I'll take you 10 a month of those. So suddenly you offer 10 grand for doing crap, that you look at that, your stomach, I mean, being from where I'm from, it's, if the fact I was, I'm still quite 20 years younger, not to jump and punch to pulp that guy
threw him out
on the spot, took my entire exercise of restraint and all that ever. But that is the thing that 10 grand is that was $1 million
to you at the time.
So, so that's the things, these temptations that you have. And don't kid yourself that, well, I can do a little bit here, but I will do these great things for myself. No.
No, compromise, there can be no compromise.
You won't. That's one thing for sure. It's your choice. It's a conscious choice. And no choice should be, I have, with the Kincaid, I have scruples. Not, I mean, bless his heart, he's now passed and all this. It's hard to talk about it. He made his choices. I mean, the fraud part is the thing. But the choices that he made. I mean, selling shampoos is great. There's no point. There's no problem selling a retail product. But you're not in an art business. So, so that all these things, working to what you believe in. Finding every possible way of doing that, selling your work. You have to sell it. You have to find a way to feed that. You have to find a way, but you have to do so much, but that actually opens up your creative process. You are your art. If you don't believe in your art, how can you expect anybody to believe in your art?
Right.
So,
say that again, because that's a critically important.
It's critically important. If you don't believe in your art, how would you expect anybody else to believe in your art? If there is something that drives you so deeply that you know and you commit and you learn and you go through it and it's exciting and it's such a great joy for you doing that, then of course you would become good at that. At any cost. And once you became good at that, that will resonate to somebody else. Somebody will relate to that because you relate to that. This is the only true currency in the art world. Everything else is essentially counterfeit. Everything else is a counterfeit banknotes. It's a forged money. You know. Works that are deeply important to you, whatever it might be, doesn't matter what. It's you, nobody but you. What drives you, what you love, what makes you tick. And whatever you find that, and you learn, you find a set of tools and skills that you need to do that. And you do that because you want it. Somebody will always relate to that, embrace it, and will want that. That's how it works. This is the true way of the art world. You don't shorthand yourself by trying to fit into something else and not digging deep into yourself. It's America, for God's sakes. You know, it's if not here, then where? It's anywhere in that sense. My professor would say, and he was, my professor would say, we're artists. We're in a gulag, we'll be drawing. We'll be drawing even in gulag. That's what he used to say. That is, if that's what you would do even in gulag, that's what you should be doing. And for the sake of that enormous joy that it gives, for the sake of the way it connects you to the world, if that you feel that. If you have this bug in you, there is no point fighting it. You either have it or don't. If you have this bug of doing that, you want it, you want to go out, you want to see how the world relates to that, that's all that matters. You will never be full and whole person unless you address this need. It's like aliens sitting inside of you. And that's how it is on me. This alien is my best friend. Whatever that wants goes. So go for that, and that will become your life. And everything you dream about will become true, because dreams has power as long as you're willing to work for it and do it and go through the extreme length. One important thing, as I always say, to me personally, art is an extreme sport. I practice art as an extreme sport. And if you're willing to do crazy things with it and go the length, that's all that matters.
Last question. You're trying very hard and very effectively, I might add, to make a major change in the art world.
Thank you, Eric.
You've
contribute to that.
There's a friend of mine, Roy Williams, always says that the person who invents the terms controls the direction.
And I would agree with that statement.
And you've invented the term Novo Realism. Novo Realism.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Tell us your thoughts and plans and what's happening with that?
First of all, as everything comes, it's all in necessity, mother of all inventions. It came out of the 20-year frustration at the very simple question of critics or collectors, clients, or viewers, which is very low. I mean, what is the type of art that you do? Because instinctively they know, they relate to that, they say it, but instinctively they know that this is somewhat different than what they see anywhere else. And I would always chalk at the top of my throat, because no existing term, every existing term had the baggage. And baggage I did not necessarily was willing to accept. So I would always give the convoluted answer for not wanting to give the name that had all these connotations. And again, to me, it has a special meaning because I'm inbred into that conversation. I'm bred into, how would you say it? I'm inheritor of this conversation because that conversation was going on in Russia in academy ever since the advent of the modernism. What a limitation of realism. Realism is a strange and peculiar term. You love it, you embrace it. The moment you start really thinking about it, you bump. It's a very strange, strange thing. You certainly are bumping into limitations. Remember this incredible meeting that you put together in Peter in Harvard Club, and this phenomenal group of greatest artists and minds came from all over to share some thoughts there. And the moment the conversation started, in about an hour in it, suddenly somebody on the left of me says, "Oh my God, it seems like the term inadequate."
Right.
It should be there on record. I was laughing. Welcome to the 50-year-old conversation.
Right.
It's nothing new there. We knew there were limitations of that term. And language is power. Language is our format. The way we formulate is the way we relate even to what we do. So even to myself, it was important to define what is it. So suddenly it came as a form of epiphany. In a one long shower at the Christmas of 2009, suddenly it just dawned on me. After one of the long conversations, it dawned on me. That's what it is. It's novo realism. And novo in the Russian sense, Russian is a thing for new, and also Latin connotation. It's a strong Latin connotation of novo as starting afresh. Because one of the most significant things of our stage in realism is it's the first time ever realism exercised as a clear choice, not as a habit, as the only available option, but as a clear choice among many things available. We're first product, realism as product of pluralist society. Realism as a product of diverse aesthetically world. That's novo realism, realism that started afresh. Now, I'm very careful and sensible. I do not wish to impose the term, even though to me this is the most perfect statement of our movement in general. That is the best way I can explain the principles behind what we do and what distinguishes us from everything that was there before or exists today. That's the best way I can answer it to myself. We're our best critics. But then it's, of course, in my close group of figurative friends, and firstly, I'm applying that, obviously, to my type of view is figurative art and figurative representational art. And my closest group of friends, Jeremy and Tony, with whom we just it's almost, artistic brothers in some way. It's in an aesthetic way, in the way we look at things, in the way how similarly we see objectives of the visual image, and just and personally. One of these great friendships, direct result of California Art Club. Our great sort of camaraderie of our small group. Jeremy was the first time I shared this ever, after letting it sink for 2 or 3 months. 2 or 3 months, I let myself chewing on that and really thinking that, oh, what a silly idea. Oh, what are you talking about? Oh, there. But, oh, man, no, that's good. I can't say it any other way. So when I shared it with Jeremy, he just totally excited immediately. That's exactly says that. So, but what we do, but the main thing is, it's a format. So not to let it slip into any hype. It's a format. So I started my, you know what I did, what my first thought was. So I started my novarealism.com. Novarealism.com blog that sort of functions as a small intellectual magazine. And the idea behind it is to lay the intellectual case behind our movement. Whether you accept this word or not, I'm not there to impose anything on anybody. It's a person, the worst thing you could do is try to identify somebody else. But that's how I identify myself. That's what I do. That's what happened Jeremy to think and Tony to think immediately and embracefully, and a group of wonderful friends, you know, just embracing this theory, that thought behind it. But that is the best I can explain what happens to us culturally. And what it is, what defines our movement. How do we relate to photorealism? It's a very yeah, photorealism is a kind of realism. Oh, it's kind of new. No. Photorealism is not realism. It's wonderful. It's great. It's nothing wrong with it. Bless their heart. It's a respected art form, full part of the postmodernist canon. It's a fascination with technology. It's a replication of technological experience. And it's great for that. So it's not that one is bad and another is good. It's clear separation of what it is, definition of what it is. So our form of realism is a human capability, is a development of human perceptual system. It's not necessarily, I love Jacob, you know, and his way of thinking. It's not necessarily, you know, like talking about this, you know, like demonizing the use of photography in general. But the complete source of our perception, complete and the only source of developing of that system is a working life. It's the ability to work life. It's abilities, because it's based on the development of ability. We're part of that. That's what I was kind of always saying. It's funny. It just makes me laugh. We're the oldest secret society. Artists were there before there were anybody. So in a way, we address the basic principles of human nature. Basic. So now we're standing at the point of sort of redefining and formulating the new art theory, because our realism is different than anything that there was before. We're not there rehashing something and just preserving in the antiquity case. We are working today. We're part of our world. Nobody can deny us. We are contemporary artists by the standard definition of the word that nobody has a right to appropriate. Now, invent your own word for whatever you want and use it. Great. Call it anything you want. Fine. It will be totally yours. But you cannot take a part of our common language and make it a selling tool, which every institution today did, essentially selling their goods, selling their invested bonds, financial instruments of particular kind under the common word contemporary. What separates Damien Hirst from not Damien Hirst? Oh, Damien Hirst is contemporary art. Who said so?
Right.
According to whom?
Well, right. Contemporary is a style, and contemporary is a term describing someone who's alive.
Exactly. How could us be not contemporary, but Andy Warhol being a contemporary?
Right.
It's a ludicrous, and I brought that point, the fact, complete to the point of criminality, criminal appropriation of public domain. Criminal.
I wrote that in a very early editorial in the magazine and lost a lot of advertising as a result of it from some very big art institutions.
I'm sure, Eric, but as we say in Russia, the ice is cracking. You know, about a year ago, New York Times, first time ever, questioned the validity of the term contemporary. It's meaningless right now. I mean, it's obvious. It's logic. It's not because I say that. It's logic. Right. You know, Julian Spalding today ripping apart I mean, the travesty of a Damien Hirst Tate show using exactly my logical construct and my line of attack of that being a financial instrument, of that being a subprime of the art world, because it makes sense. So we're at the exciting point. We're at the point of you could have only dreamed of. We, the artists, we invent of the art of this new millennium. We're the ones who are going to do it.
Right.
And with an absence of institutions, great. Let them trail behind 30 years as they always do. We're the ones to define it. We're not there to wait for them to define us 30 years from now, not knowing a crap. We're there consciously and actively. Think what we do. Think what is happening. Think what a great part of the shift, cultural shifts we're all part of in our society. And make our case. So Novorealism is a credible intellectual case to a credible observer to what we all are facing without any desire to impose that. It has a life of its own, but it's a damn good word.
This has been an awesome, awesome time. Spending time with you, watching you paint the demo, spending time in your studio, staying here with you, you being my host. It's been a memorable, a lifetime memorable experience.
Eric, it's always great to have you. It's fabulous to have you. Thank you for what you're doing, because it's our collective. We are our art world. And what our great magazines, the ones that do that, they do for that, our collective family, is incredible. You're feeling the institutional void. You're doing that. You're doing your part in that. And I'm grateful to you for that. And I'm sure, as a lot of artists, everybody, a lot of artists do, you really affecting the lives of the artists and giving them a way to see that. And we need that.
Well, thank you. It's not about us.
It's about us.
It's about us.
It's about us.
Right.
It's all about us. All.
Well, and it's also about them. And the meaning is that art changes lives.
Absolutely.
Art changed my life. I remember the first time I stood in front of a Bouguereau and I wept because I could see it properly for the first time after someone exposed me to art. It wasn't on my radar. And I thought, if I can bring this to other people, and there are so many people out there who don't know this exists, who will find such great joy and beauty and question and they will just, their lives will change.
Eric, enormously important. Another huge aspect that I'm thinking greatly, and we're exchanging greatly with friends, with Jeremy and with Tony, and with many artists. And I'm trying to say always, it's this incredible place that our art has in our society.
Right.
That place was taken away and misappropriated. And postmodernism failed on a great mission first and foremost. It became an instrument of fraud. But art has a function in society. Art built our society. So looking within the Novorealism format and a platform about the underpinnings of the theory of this, our realism and art form, and we're looking at the great findings of science, of current science, from evolutionary aesthetics to science of the mind, to cognitive science, and to anthropology, and to the writers like Dutton and Steven Pinker, and it's incredible. I mean, art was there before language existed. It was there for the good reason.
It is language.
It is the primal language. It's a first society builder. I completely believe that art was the first religion. Art was first, it was the way to relate of relating to the universe. So art has a tremendous power of building community, of building community, and in that way being part of society. So today, we need the drive of that theoretical thinking is basically has a one purpose. how do we make the works of art of true greatness, in whatever form that would take? My view of that, my drive is this great multi-figure works. But the art of greatness is not necessarily the scale stock, but the art of true greatness that will address the world of today, that will become the world of today, that would communicate to people, that will make people weep, that would make people think about what's happening to them in this society.
Right.
This is the power and the cause of art and the duty of art. And if that is the great movement that we're all part of, when I say that, it's not really some self-congratulatory connotation. It's rather opposite. It's rather, oh my God, if that's happened, that our abilities happen to coincide with this incredible moment in cultural history of our society, what is it that we do that would be adequate?
See, it's about having a great responsibility.
Exactly.
It's, I look at this and I say we happen to be here at a very special time.
Exactly.
And we have to take advantage of it, because otherwise we're not paving the way for others before us.
Exactly. And another important thing when you said that the tides are changing and our generation in some degree will come and be part of this greater, and at some point it probably will, whether it will or not, we'll see, probably. But the only reason it will happen is as we collectively together make the step up and create in every work, not satisfied and not find any comfort zone and just doing something that happened, this part of the market today can sustain and that.
Push it.
No.
Push it.
If we can step up above any expectations of today and create the art of tomorrow, only then we fulfill that incredible historic mission that we're there, that we face today. And only then we would be able to say that, yes, we put our capabilities, our learned abilities to this ultimate test, and we did something incredible, and we did the art of greatness. That's what I hope to share with everybody and encourage everybody to learn and to find from every source and to follow their heart. The only road to the art of greatness, true greatness, it's through own heart, no other way.
It's interesting that heart has the word art in it.
Exactly.
Well, I'm thrilled that your father dropped you on that pallet and that you're one of our greats today. And I'm honored that you spent time with me today.
Eric,
Thank
it's
you.
a great honor to have you and a great joy.
Well, that was from Techniques of the Russian Masters with Alexey Steele. We had so much fun. I went to LA with the crew. We spent 4 or 5 days with Alexey, and we met his father, who was living at the time, who's one of the great Russian masters. We drank vodka together. We had a lot of fun. We looked at his collection. We got all that on video, plus a lot more. You want to learn more about this video at lilyartvideo.com. Keep learning, keep growing, and stay home. I'm Eric Rhodes.
There's always form inside, but there comes into this masses, and then masses comes into shapes. They arrange themselves into shapes, and then we read those shapes. So always seeing this shape-form relationship, form underneath of the shape, a form collected into shapes. There is the value progressions. Just like there is a value drop in a light, there is a value increase in a shadow. So it's not a detail in a shadow. There is not something, but there is this determined by the spacing and form, value increases. Value increases. Value drops in light and value increases in the shadow. And then inside of that, it fires up inside. you're fortunate enough to hold these magical devices, which are our brushes, to have our paints, to have our canvas, to have our subjects, and to throw it all there and look and learn, and always, always, always feel the sensation and the joy that it comes and brings back to you. Thank you very much.